The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, crisp white against my weathered mailbox. I almost threw it away with the rest of the bills and advertisements, but something about the return address made my hands freeze. Carter and Associates Legal Firm, the same name that had haunted my nightmares for 8 years. As I tore it open with trembling fingers, sunlight streaming through my small apartment window, the words on the letterhead blurred together. Estate of Marcus Chen, urgent matter requiring immediate attention. My coffee mug slipped from my other hand, shattering against the kitchen floor as memories I had buried came rushing back like a flood. Welcome to my channel, where I share real stories with unexpected twists. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe and give me a thumbs up. It really means a lot to me. Now, let's begin this story. My name is Luna Martinez, and 8 years ago, I was a 21-year-old college senior with dreams of becoming a social worker. I lived in a cozy house in suburban Phoenix with my stepfather, Marcus, and my 3 younger half-brothers. Diego, 15, and already showing signs of the artist he would become. Mateo, 13 and obsessed with basketball. And little Javier, only 10 years old with the biggest heart you could imagine. Marcus Chen had married my mother, Elena, when I was 8, after my biological father disappeared from our lives. Marcus never tried to replace my dad, but he loved me like his own blood. He was a quiet man who worked as an engineer for a solar energy company, always tinkering with gadgets in his garage workshop. The smell of motor oil and metal shavings became the scent of home to me. When Mom died in a car accident during my sophomore year of college, Marcus held our family together with steady hands and endless patience. He never remarried, devoting himself entirely to raising 4 children who needed him desperately. Every Sunday, he made his famous breakfast burritos while we gathered around the kitchen table, planning our week and sharing our dreams. The house was filled with laughter in those days. Diego would sketch portraits of all of us during family movie nights. Mateo would practice his free throws against the garage door until Marcus finally installed a proper hoop. Javier collected rocks from every family hiking trip, lining them up on his bedroom windowsill like tiny treasures. Marcus always talked about the future with such certainty. He had college funds set up for all of us, including me. He spoke about walking us down aisles at our weddings, about holding grandchildren someday. "This family is my greatest achievement," he would say, usually while helping one of the boys with homework or listening to me complain about difficult professors. Then, on a scorching July afternoon, Marcus collapsed while installing solar panels at a client's house. The doctors said it was a massive heart attack. At 48 years old, this man who had never missed one of Mateo's games or Diego's art shows was gone. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and condolence cards. I sat in the front pew of St. Anthony's Catholic Church, holding Javier's small hand while he sobbed into my shoulder. Diego stared straight ahead with empty eyes, while Mateo kept looking toward the back of the church as if expecting Marcus to walk through the doors and tell us this was all a terrible mistake. After the service, as people filtered out offering their sympathies, Marcus's older brother Vincent approached me with his wife, Carmen, and their daughter, Isabella. I had met them only twice before at family gatherings. Vincent lived in Scottsdale and worked in real estate development. There was something about his expensive suits and calculating smile that it always made me uncomfortable. "Luna, sweetheart," Carmen said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We need to discuss the boy's future. You're still in college, barely able to take care of yourself." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean? We're family. We stay together." Vincent cleared his throat, adjusting his gold watch. "Marcus never established legal guardianship papers. Without proper documentation, the state could get involved. These boys need stable adults who can provide for them properly." "I can provide for them," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I felt the weight of their impossibility. I had $17 in my checking account and a part-time job at a campus bookstore that barely covered my own expenses. "You're 21 years old with no real income," Isabella interjected. She was 25, married, and had always looked at our close-knit family with something that seemed like jealousy. "Be realistic, Luna. They need proper guardians." My heart started racing as I realized what they were suggesting. "They're not going anywhere. Marcus left the house to all of us. We'll figure it out." Vincent's expression hardened slightly. "Actually, Luna, we've been going through Marcus's papers. There doesn't seem to be a will. The house has a substantial mortgage, and there are debts we're still discovering. The boys deserve better than uncertainty." That night, I sat on the living room floor, surrounded by my 3 brothers and moving boxes. The house suddenly felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. Diego was sketching furiously in his notebook, his pencil movements sharp and angry. Mateo bounced a basketball against the wall with mechanical precision. Javier curled up next to me, his 10-year-old body still shaking with grief. "Listen to me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I promise you this. We're going to stay together, no matter what it takes, no matter what we have to sacrifice. We're going to take care of each other." Diego looked up from his sketching. "What if we can't? What if Vincent's right?" "Then we'll prove him wrong," I said, pulling all 3 of them closer. "Marcus taught us that family isn't just about blood or money. It's about showing up for each other, especially when things get hard." Outside, the Arizona desert stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars. Inside our little house, 4 orphaned kids held on to each other and tried to believe that love would be enough to keep us together. I had no idea that our real battle was just beginning, or that the people who should have protected us were about to betray us in ways I never could have imagined. Sometimes the most ordinary days hide extraordinary challenges that will reshape everything we thought we knew about the people we trust. Within a week of Marcus's funeral, Vincent arrived at our house with a lawyer named Mr. Rodriguez and an official-looking woman from Child Protective Services. I was in the kitchen making sandwiches for the boys' lunch when I heard the doorbell ring. Through the window, I could see Vincent's silver Mercedes parked in our driveway, gleaming under the harsh Arizona sun. "Luna, we need to talk," Vincent said when I opened the door. His tone was different now, more authoritative and cold. Gone was any pretense of family concern. The CPS worker, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Wells, sat at our kitchen table reviewing paperwork while the boys huddled together on the living room couch. I could hear Javier whispering to Diego, asking what was happening. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely concentrate on the conversation. "Miss Martinez," Patricia said, looking up from her clipboard, Your living situation is unstable. You have no steady income, no legal guardianship documentation, and 3 minor children depending on you. Mr. Chen has petitioned for emergency custody of his nephews. They're my brothers, I said, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay calm. Half-brothers, Vincent corrected. And you're barely an adult yourself. These boys need structure, financial security, proper supervision. Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat and pulled out a thick folder. Miss Martinez, we've reviewed your stepfather's estate. He died intestate, without a will. The house is mortgaged for more than it's worth, and there are significant debts. Credit cards, medical bills, business loans we're still uncovering. I felt the room spinning around me. This couldn't be right. Marcus was meticulous about finances. He always talked about planning for our futures, about making sure we were protected. That's impossible. Marcus had life insurance. He had savings accounts. He showed me college fund statements just last year. I'm sorry, but there's no record of any of that, the lawyer said, not looking sorry at all. The estate is essentially worthless. In fact, the debts exceed any assets. Diego appeared in the kitchen doorway, his sketchbook clutched against his chest. Luna? What's happening? Before I could answer, Vincent stood up. Boys, pack your things. You're coming to stay with us while we sort this out. No, I said, stepping between Vincent and my brothers. They're not going anywhere. Patricia looked at me with what might have been pity. Miss Martinez, this is temporary, just until we can evaluate the situation properly and ensure the children's welfare. That's when Mateo spoke up from behind Diego. We want to stay with Luna. Yeah, Javier added, his small voice barely audible. Luna takes care of us. Vincent's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something calculating and cold in his eyes. Children don't always know what's best for them. The next 3 hours were a nightmare. Patricia supervised while Vincent and Carmen helped the boys pack bags. I followed them around the house, trying to comfort Diego when he started crying, reassuring Mateo that this wasn't permanent, carrying Javier when his legs seemed too shaky to hold him up. This is wrong, I kept saying to Patricia. These boys just lost their father. You're traumatizing them even more. Sometimes difficult decisions are necessary for long-term welfare, she replied, checking items off her list. As they loaded the boys into Vincent's Mercedes, Javier broke away and ran back to me. Don't let them keep us, Luna. Please, come get us soon. I will, baby. I promise. I'm going to figure this out. Diego handed me his sketchbook through the car window. Keep this safe for me? I nodded, unable to speak through the tears. That night, alone in the house for the first time in my life, I sat in Marcus's workshop surrounded by his tools and half-finished projects. The silence was deafening. I opened Diego's sketchbook and found page after page of drawings. Our family at the breakfast table, Marcus teaching Mateo to change a tire, all of us hiking in Sedona last Christmas. On the last page, he had written in careful lettering, "The Martinez Chen family, forever." I called every legal aid organization I could find, but nobody wanted to take a case involving estate law and child custody without money up front. I sold my textbooks, my laptop, even my mother's jewelry, but it wasn't nearly enough to hire a real attorney. Meanwhile, Vincent was moving fast. Within 2 weeks, he had petitioned the court for permanent custody, claiming I was unfit and unstable. He hired expensive lawyers who painted me as an irresponsible college student who couldn't even support herself, let alone 3 growing boys. The court-appointed attorney assigned to represent the boys was overworked and barely had time to meet with them. When I finally got to see my brothers at a supervised visit, they looked smaller somehow. Diego had dark circles under his eyes. Mateo's basketball was deflated and forgotten in the corner. Javier clung to me and wouldn't let go when the visit ended. "Are you coming home soon?" he whispered. "I'm trying, baby. I'm trying so hard." But every door I knocked on seemed to slam shut. The house went into foreclosure. Marcus's former employer claimed they had no record of any partnership or profit-sharing agreement. The bank said there were no accounts under his name beyond a checking account with $237. I dropped out of college 3 credits short of graduation and moved into a studio apartment in Central Phoenix that cost $600 a month. I got a job waiting tables at a 24-hour diner called Rosita's, working double shifts to pay for the lawyer fees and court costs that kept mounting. My world had shrunk to work, sleep, and fighting a legal system that seemed designed to keep families like mine separated. Every night, I fell asleep clutching Diego's sketchbook, promising Marcus's memory that I wouldn't give up on his boys. But Vincent had resources I couldn't match. He could afford investigators, expert witnesses, court filings. His lawyers argued that the boys were thriving in their stable home, attending better schools, receiving proper supervision. They painted me as a desperate young woman clinging to a fantasy of playing house with children who deserved better. 3 months after Marcus's death, I sat in a courtroom listening to a judge explain why temporary custody was being extended indefinitely. The boys sat across the aisle with Vincent and Carmen, wearing new clothes that didn't quite fit right. Diego wouldn't meet my eyes. Mateo stared at his hands. Javier kept looking back at me with confusion and hurt that broke something inside my chest. "Miss Martinez," the judge said, "while your love for these children is evident, love alone isn't sufficient to provide for their complex needs." Walking out of that courthouse into the blazing Phoenix heat, I felt like I was drowning in plain sight. People passed by on the sidewalk, going about their normal lives, while mine was falling apart one legal document at a time. I had promised to keep our family together, and I was failing in the most devastating way possible. That night, I started a journal, writing down every detail I could remember about Marcus's finances, his work, his plans for our future. Something about this situation felt wrong, beyond just the tragedy of losing him. But I was too exhausted, too overwhelmed, too broke to figure out what I was missing. Truth has a way of demanding our attention when we least expect it, but sometimes we're too buried under our immediate survival to hear what it's trying to tell us. For 2 years, I lived in a limbo that felt like slow-motion drowning. I worked 70-hour weeks at the diner, saved every penny I could, and spent my days off sitting in law libraries trying to understand custody laws and estate procedures. My court-appointed visits with the boys happened once a month in a sterile conference room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Diego had stopped drawing. When I asked about his art, he just shrugged and said he didn't feel like it anymore. Mateo talked about his new basketball team, but couldn't meet my eyes when he described the games. Javier, now 12, had developed a stutter that broke my heart every time I heard it. Do you still live in the same place?" he asked during one visit. "Yes, baby. Same apartment. Your beds are still waiting for you." But even as I said it, I could see in his face that he was starting to forget what home used to feel like. Vincent and Carmen had enrolled them in private schools, bought them designer clothes, moved them into a house with a swimming pool. From the outside, it looked like they were providing everything 3 growing boys could need. But during our visits, I noticed things that worried me. Diego had lost weight. Mateo's natural confidence seemed dimmed. Javier flinched whenever an adult raised their voice, even mine. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was opening mail at the diner between breakfast and lunch rush when I found an envelope addressed to me from Diego. Inside was a single piece of paper with a drawing of our old house, but in the picture, the windows were boarded up and there were weeds growing through cracks in the driveway. At the bottom, in small letters, he had written, "I dream about this place every night." That same day, my phone rang while I was refilling coffee cups. It was Mateo, calling from school. "Luna," he whispered. "Something's wrong. Vincent keeps asking us questions about Dad's work, about whether he ever mentioned business deals or partnerships. When I said I didn't know, he got really angry." My blood turned cold. "What kind of questions?" "About whether Dad ever talked about selling his part of the company, about contracts or agreements. Luna, I'm scared. Carmen said we shouldn't talk to you about family business." "Listen to me," I said, stepping into the diner's supply closet for privacy. "You did the right thing calling me. Don't answer any more questions about Dad without me there, okay?" That night, I called Marcus's former boss, a man named Robert Yamamoto, who had sent flowers to the funeral. When I explained who I was, his voice changed immediately. "Luna, I've been wondering about you kids. How are you holding up?" "We're struggling," I admitted. "Mr. Yamamoto, I need to ask you something. Did Marcus have any kind of partnership or ownership stake in the company?" The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Luna," he said finally, "your stepfather owned 40% of Southwest Solar Solutions. He helped me build this company from nothing. When he passed away, his brothers came in with some lawyer and cashed out his shares immediately. They said they were settling his estate, paying off debts." The phone slipped in my sweaty palm. "How much was his share worth?" "At the time of the buyout, about $2.7 million. The supply closet spun around me. I sank to the floor among boxes of napkins and coffee filters, trying to process what I had just heard. Nearly $3 million. While I was working double shifts and living on ramen noodles, while my brothers were being held hostage by people who had stolen their inheritance. "Mr. Yamamoto," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "do you have any documentation of Marcus's ownership?" "Of course. Partnership agreements, profit-sharing contracts, tax documents." "Luna, didn't anyone explain this to you? Marcus set up a trust for you kids. Everything was supposed to go into education funds and living expenses until you all reached 25. I hung up the phone and sat in that cramped supply closet, surrounded by the tools of my minimum wage survival, finally understanding the scope of what had been stolen from us. Not just money, but our entire future. Our chance to grieve Marcus properly, to heal as a family, to honor his memory by becoming the people he believed we could be. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 2 years and spent 12 hours in the law library, researching estate fraud, fiduciary duty, and criminal theft. I printed every article I could find about families who had successfully challenged fraudulent estate distributions. Then I did something that felt both terrifying and inevitable. I called Vincent. "I know what you did," I said when he answered. "Luna? What are you talking about?" "Southwest Solar Solutions, Marcus's partnership, the trust fund you stole from us." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. "You're confused, Luna. Grief can make people imagine things that aren't real." $2.7 million, Vincent, plus interest, plus the trust accounts you liquidated. I'm going to prove what you did, and I'm going to get my brothers back. "You have no proof of anything," he said, but I could hear something new in his voice. Fear. "We'll see about that." When I hung up, my hands were shaking, but for the first time in 2 years, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of someone drowning, but the fierce, determined hope of someone who finally understands the size of the fight ahead. I walked to Diego's sketchbook, which I had kept on my nightstand every night since he gave it to me. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "The truth will set us free. Luna, October 15th, 2023. That night, I called a legal aid lawyer named Sarah Delacroix, who specialized in family law and estate fraud. She agreed to meet with me the next morning. "This is going to be a long fight," she warned me after I explained everything. "They have money, lawyers, and a 2-year head start. But if what you're telling me is true, what they did isn't just civil fraud. It's criminal theft from minor children." "How long?" I asked. "Maybe years. And it's going to get ugly. They'll attack your character, your fitness as a guardian, everything about you." I thought about Diego's empty eyes, Mateo's dimmed confidence, Javier's stutter. "I don't care how long it takes or how ugly it gets. Those are my brothers, and they're coming home." Rock bottom becomes the foundation on which we rebuild everything we thought we had lost forever. The legal battle took 3 years, but Sarah was right. It was worth every sleepless night and every dollar I scraped together. The breakthrough came when we subpoenaed Vincent's financial records and discovered a paper trail of expensive purchases made immediately after Marcus's death. A new house, luxury cars, private school tuition for Isabella, even a vacation to Europe. During the trial, Marcus's business partner, Robert, testified about the partnership agreement and the trust fund that should have secured our futures. Bank records showed how Vincent had systematically liquidated every account, claiming emergency powers as the eldest surviving relative of minor children. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. Carmen, overwhelmed by guilt and facing potential criminal charges, broke down on the witness stand and admitted they had known about the trust fund all along. "We thought Luna was too young," she sobbed. "We convinced ourselves the children would be better off with adults who could manage that kind of money responsibly." The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Not only did he order the immediate return of all stolen funds, now worth over $4 million with interest, but he also awarded us additional damages for the emotional trauma inflicted on 4 orphaned children. More importantly, he ordered the immediate return of my brothers to my custody. The day they came home, Diego was 17, Mateo 15, and Javier 14. They had grown so much in the 3 years we were apart that I almost didn't recognize them walking up the steps to our new house, a 4-bedroom home in Tempe with a proper art studio for Diego and a basketball hoop in the driveway for Mateo. That first night, we sat around the kitchen table eating takeout pizza because I was too emotional to cook. Diego had brought a new sketchbook, and he showed me drawing after drawing he had made in secret during his time with Vincent. Portraits of our old family dinners, landscapes of hiking trips we had taken with Marcus, detailed sketches of the house where we had been happy. "I never stopped drawing," he said quietly. "I just couldn't let them see." Mateo, now taller than me and captain of his high school basketball team, kept looking around the house as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. "Luna," he said finally, "I'm sorry I stopped calling you. You were protecting yourself, baby. You have nothing to apologize for." Javier, no longer the little boy I remembered but a thoughtful teenager with Marcus's gentle eyes, had overcome his stutter through speech therapy. "I knew you'd come get us," he said. "Even when Vincent said you had given up, I knew you wouldn't." We spent that summer rediscovering each other. Diego applied to art school with a portfolio that made his teachers weep. Mateo earned a full basketball scholarship to Arizona State University. Javier joined the debate team and discovered he had inherited Marcus's engineering mind. I finished my degree, finally, and opened a non-profit organization that helps families navigate estate fraud and custody battles. Every case we win feels like honoring Marcus's memory and the promise I made to him in that empty living room 8 years ago. Vincent and Carmen faced criminal charges for estate fraud. Vincent lost his real estate license and spent 2 years in minimum security prison. Carmen divorced him and moved back to her hometown in New Mexico. Isabella, who had been an adult during the fraud but had benefited from the stolen money, was ordered to pay restitution that would follow her for decades. I won't pretend that everything became perfect after we won the lawsuit. The years of separation had left scars on all of us. Diego struggled with anxiety about abandonment. Mateo had learned to hide his emotions so deeply that it took months for him to trust me with his fears again. Javier had nightmares about being taken away from me, but we worked through it together with family therapy and patience and the kind of stubborn love that Marcus had modeled for us. We created new traditions while honoring the old ones. Sunday breakfast burritos became sacred again. We took annual hiking trips to Sedona, where we scattered some of Marcus's ashes and told stories about the man who had loved us enough to plan for our futures, even after he was gone. 5 years later, I stood in the audience at Diego's art school graduation, watching him accept an award for his senior exhibition about family resilience. Mateo had just signed with a professional basketball team, but he still called me every Sunday. Javier was starting his freshman year at MIT on a full academic scholarship, planning to study renewable energy engineering like the father who had raised him. During Diego's graduation speech, he talked about the power of keeping promises, even when they seem impossible to fulfill. He mentioned a sister who had worked double shifts and fought legal battles and never gave up on bringing her family home. Family, he said to the crowd, isn't just about who you're related to. It's about who shows up when the world falls apart. It's about who keeps fighting for you when everyone else says it's hopeless. It's about love that refuses to quit, even when quitting would be easier. After the ceremony, we went to our favorite Mexican restaurant, the same one where Marcus used to take us for special occasions. As we sat around the table, sharing stories and laughing until our sides hurt, I felt his presence so strongly it took my breath away. We had kept our promise to him. We had stayed together. We had become the family he always believed we could be. The money was life-changing, but it wasn't what saved us. We saved each other through the simple act of refusing to let go, of believing that love could survive anything, including separation and betrayal, and the kind of grief that changes you forever. Today, people sometimes ask me how I found the strength to fight for so long, especially when I was barely more than a kid myself. The answer is simple. I made a promise to the people I loved most, and keeping promises, even the impossible ones, is what families do. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. What family promise means the most to you? Sometimes the most important victories are the ones that take years to achieve, but love that refuses to quit will always find a way home.